The Marvel Cinematic Universe is arguably the most successful film franchise of all time, so maybe that's why it's so surprising that Marvel has kept things pretty much drama-free for so long. But that doesn't mean the studio's record is totally spotless. Here are a few of the biggest scandals to hit Marvel's movies. Marvel Studios make some seriously amazing movies, but it's fair to say a lot of them can feel pretty similar. Sure, every so often, a director will put their unique stamp on their film, but for the most part, Marvel Studios has a uniform tone they want to hit with all their films. And if a director sees things differently, they might soon find themselves out of a job. The MCU has been involved in a couple public spats with high-profile directors. Most recently, Ava DuVernay walked away from Black Panther, saying she declined the project because it just wasn't going to be an Ava DuVernay film. Patty Jenkins also had her fair share of issues when it came to dealing with Marvel. She was hired to direct Thor: The Dark World, but after just 2 months, she made the decision to leave the sequel, as Marvel wasn't interested in the story Jenkins wanted to tell. Perhaps the most infamous example of Marvel and a filmmaker clashing heads is the sad story of Edgar Wright. The English auteur had been attached to Ant-Man since 2006, but things just didn't go according to plan.
The most diplomatic, answer is that, I wanted to make a Marvel movie, but I don't think they really wanted to make an Edgar Wright movie.
After the studio decided to rewrite the script without him, Wright said so long to the MCU in 2014. It was a disappointing departure and proof that no filmmaker can stray too far from the MCU style. For the most part, actors seem to really enjoy working on Marvel projects, but not everyone has enjoyed their time with the Avengers. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Natalie Portman really wanted Patty Jenkins to direct Thor: The Dark World, so the actress naturally became quite upset with the studio when they parted ways with the filmmaker. Portman stuck around for the film anyway due to contractual obligations, but she was quickly written out of the franchise with a throwaway line in Thor: Ragnarok.
Sorry to hear that Jane dumped you.
She didn't dump me, I dumped her. It's a mutual dumping.
Mickey Rourke found himself frustrated with the studio after Iron Man 2. Rourke wanted to flesh out the character of Ivan Vanko and work to create a more complex character for the film. But according to Rourke, Marvel producers cut almost all of that out, leaving us with a far less interesting version of the role. Of course, the most infamous examples of Marvel arguing with actors is how the studio treated the original Bruce Banner, Edward Norton, and the first Colonel Rhodes, Terrence Howard. While both men are notoriously difficult to work with, it seems they were cut from the franchise largely due to financial and creative issues. When Guardians of the Galaxy came out in 2014, you wouldn't have found much Gamora merchandise in stores. And when Avengers: Age of Ultron hit theaters, Black Widow merchandise was almost impossible to find. The situation was so bad, in fact, that Mark Ruffalo actually called Marvel out on it. When it came to merch, female superheroes just weren't getting any respect, and it's largely thanks to Isaac Ike Perlmutter. Back in the day, Perlmutter was the CEO of Marvel, and he was in charge of everything: movies, TV shows, and publication. Unfortunately, by all accounts, Perlmutter wasn't the biggest fan of diversity. In fact, he was adamantly against making female merchandise, saying it wouldn't sell. It was so bad that when Shane Black wanted to make Maya Hansen the main villain for Iron Man 3, Marvel brass said no way, claiming nobody would ever buy her toy. Needless to say, Marvel fans were pretty incensed by Perlmutter's misogyny, but his outdated opinions were bad for the company in more ways than one. These days, the MCU is a largely inclusive place, what with films like Captain Marvel and Black Panther. But things haven't always been so welcoming around Marvel Studios, especially when Perlmutter was in charge. When Don Cheadle replaced Terrence Howard in Iron Man 2, for example, the CEO allegedly said nobody would notice because black people looked the same. So it's easy to see why it took so long for Marvel to make a movie led by a black superhero. Fortunately, in 2015, there was a major reorganization inside Marvel, wherein Disney changed Perlmutter's title from CEO to Chairman of Marvel Entertainment. More importantly, while Perlmutter is still in charge of the company's publications and TV shows, producer Kevin Feige has been given full control of Marvel Studios, the filmmaking branch of the company. And when you look at how amazing Phase 3 has been, it's easy to see how Perlmutter was holding the MCU back. In the lead-up to Avengers: Age of Ultron, Chris Evans and Jeremy Renner were doing an interview with Digital Spy when the subject of Black Widow came up. In the MCU, Black Widow works alongside multiple male heroes and has close friendships with both Hawkeye and Captain America. She's never romantically involved with either of them, and although some fans like to speculate about relationships between these characters, it's never implied in the movies themselves. But when word got out that Natasha actually was somehow involved with Bruce Banner in the upcoming film, Digital Spy asked Evans and Renner what they thought about Black Widow's relationships with the three aforementioned male characters.
She's a slut. I was going to say something along that line. It's complete horror.
Obviously, this did not sit well with the fan base, and after a huge outcry, Evans and Renner published apologies in Entertainment Weekly. While Avengers Age of Ultron has a lot going for it, the movie was a hit with multiple controversies. For example, somebody thought it was a good idea to have Tony Stark make this joke.
So if I lift it, I then rule Asgard?
Yes, of course.
I will be reinstituting Prima Nocta.
And then there was the Black Widow debacle. During the film, the black-clad hero calls herself a monster after saying she was forcibly sterilized at a school for assassins. This sent shockwaves through the fanbase, as many were furious that Widow would consider herself a monster for not being able to have children. And the outrage was so severe that it allegedly drove director Joss Whedon off Twitter. This wasn't the only incident that gave Whedon headaches. The Marvel brass kept forcing him to alter the notorious scene where Thor goes spelunking for info on the Infinity Stones. Whedon was so frustrated with the changes that he wanted to cut the scene, but Marvel said if he did, that he would also have to lose the scene where the Avengers arrive at Hawkeye's farm. The studio allegedly also wanted him to drop the scenes where the Avengers come under the spell of Scarlet Witch. The back-and-forth drama resulted in a very messy movie. And even though Mark Ruffalo would go on to beg Whedon to stay in the franchise, the director reportedly said he'd never direct a Marvel movie again. Love him or hate him, film critics are an essential part of the Hollywood machine. They impact the conversation surrounding a movie and can define a film's legacy. So unless they're dreading bad reviews, movie studios usually allow critics to view advanced screenings of their films. That way, good reviews can build buzz and get people excited before a movie hits theaters. But in 2017, Disney laid the hammer down, refusing to give an advanced screening of Thor Ragnarok to the Los Angeles Times. So, what motivated Disney to keep the Times out of Asgard? Well, the paper had published a series of stories on the relationship between the movie studio and the city of Anaheim, California, where Disney is based. According to the Times, Anaheim gives the company an insane amount of perks, and Disney has even tried to influence the city's elections. Obviously, Disney wasn't crazy about this kind of scrutiny, and while it never denied the stories were true, it enacted a ban against the newspaper, starting with Thor Ragnarok. However, in the wake of Disney's move against the LA Times, pretty much every journalist in the US banded together to fight the studio. Multiple critics organizations refused to consider Disney films for awards, and outlets such as the Washington Post and the New York Times said they wouldn't attend Disney events. Disney rescinded the ban after 4 days. Perhaps the most notorious scandal to ever hit the MCU, the James Gunn controversy started in 2018 when a group of right-wing Twitter users delved deep into the director's Twitter feed. They unearthed a series of controversial tweets about some pretty dark topics. And while Gunn meant them as jokes, they really weren't at all funny. This revelation prompted Disney to fire Gunn from the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, which turned the Marvel world upside down. Twitter erupted over Gunn's firing, and the cast of Guardians all stuck up for Gunn, signing a petition asking Disney to hire him back. Gunn himself profusely apologized for the tweets, saying he changed as a person over the years and no longer made such provocative jokes. Others pointed out that the folks who brought down Gunn were probably less worried about his inappropriate tweets, more interested in silencing a high-profile critic of President Donald Trump. Wishing to avoid controversy, Disney stuck by its guns and refused to bring Gunn back until 2019. The House of Mouse had searched for someone to replace the director, but to no avail. And then news broke that Gunn had been hired by DC to write and direct a Suicide Squad sequel. Shortly afterward, Disney rehired Gunn to finish his sci-fi trilogy. It was an unprecedented move for the company, and while some fans were disappointed, most were elated to see Gunn back in charge of the Guardians. When it comes to Asian representation, the MCU has been plagued by a whole heap of problems. When Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 soared into theaters, most fans were pleased with the latest installment in James Gunn's planned trilogy. However, the character of Mantis proved especially troublesome for critics of the film. In the comics, Mantis is a feminist icon, a powerful psychic, and a formidable warrior who has defeated the likes of Thor, Iron Man, and Black Panther. This woman can hold her own with Marvel's best, but that's obviously not the version we got in the James Gunn film. Played by Pom Klementieff, the MCU Mantis is timid and fearful. On top of that, she constantly refers to Ego as master, and some have argued this plays into racist stereotypes about Asian women being submissive. Even Steve Englehart, who co-created the comic's character, came out and said, "I was not happy with Mantis' portrayal. That character has nothing to do with Mantis." Then there's Doctor Strange. During production on the film, director Scott Derrickson realized that gender swapping the Sorcerer Supreme would cause him to stumble into another Asian stereotype, that of the Dragon Lady, a domineering and mysterious Asian woman of age with duplicitous motives. To get around this, he cast Tilda Swinton in the role, which frustrated critics anyway, who accused Derrickson and Marvel of whitewashing the character. In 2019, however, Marvel took a step in the right direction by announcing its first ever Asian-led film, Shang-Chi. That project isn't without controversy either, though, and the hero's complicated past has stirred up criticism in China. According to the South China Morning Post, Marvel fans took to Weibo, China's version of Twitter, to voice their frustrations about Shang-Chi's father, Fu Manchu, a white-hating Chinese mystic who was created to play into fears of the so-called Yellow Peril. Luckily, there's no way you could put Fu Manchu on the silver screen today, and as long as Marvel realizes that, they should be able to avoid provoking controversy over the character, this time at least. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.